If you would open your Bibles up, I'm going to jump to Acts chapter 9 in a moment, but in Acts chapter 4 is where I'm going to start on. And think about the idea of leadership. And what we'll do is this is going to be kind of open discussion. We're going to feed off each other, and we know that'll be a good thing. In a workshop, trying to help each other with the ideas of developing leaders, and from the concept of I need to develop leaders two ways. One, I need to develop a leader within me, and I need to start there. Then I need to develop the leaders that are around me, those that are out there. And the two overlap each other so much. The notes you have, I've got two programs I can teach from, and I took chapter 1 out of both of them and just kind of meshed them together. And it kind of goes back and forth between the two, because really they overlap. As I develop myself, I can develop someone else. And then as I develop myself again, I can develop somebody else. And so you kind of go back and forth as you go through the process. But really, I base all of this and think about this. When I think about leadership development, I think of one person. I mean, we think about Jesus, and that's number one. Number two is Barnabas. And it's interesting, when we first meet Barnabas in Acts chapter 4, in verse 36, it says, Joseph, who was also called by the apostles Barnabas, which means the son of encouragement. Barnabas is not his name. His name is Joseph. They nicknamed him Barnabas, and that stuck. Nickname stuck. And nicknames stick based on, as Dale was talking about, the way we live, the way we talk, the way we think. We can get a nickname hung on us, and sometimes it's just by the way we look, but sometimes it's by the way we act. And Barnabas has that nickname hung on him as the son of encouragement. Then when you jump over to Acts chapter 9 and look at Barnabas again, when he kind of makes a reappearance of sorts, when Saul, Acts chapter 9 is the telling of the conversion of Saul of Tarsus. It opens up with Saul is on his way to Damascus with letters in his hand to arrest Christians. It says he's breathing out threatenings and murders against the church. Through the process of the chapter, we find that Saul has, on the road to Damascus, the Lord appears to him. He goes on into Damascus as he's told, waits on Ananias to come from you. Imagine being the evangelist Ananias. Ananias, I got somebody you need to go talk to. Okay, no problem. It's Saul of Tarsus. Now wait a minute. What am I going to do? We had a class here a while back talking about the Dan Winkler's new book on forgiveness. And he opens up his book and talks about the man who received the call to go to the prison and study with a young man in prison who wanted to be baptized. That young man was Jeffrey Dahmer. He said there are phone calls and there are people that you come in, you think about studying with, you go, what? But as Saul is converted, Saul goes to Jerusalem. The people in Damascus, he starts preaching to them. They're kind of scared of him. Even though he's defending the faith, they said something's got to happen. And so Barnabas goes and gets him and brings him to Jerusalem. And in verse 27, he says he took him, brought him to the apostles, declared to them how on the road he had seen the Lord, who spoke to him, and how at Damascus he had preached boldly in the name of Jesus. Barnabas takes Saul, stands up for him in front of the elders in Jerusalem. And then, of course, Saul later goes to Tarsus. And when it comes time to bring him back, who goes back and gets him? Barnabas does. Barnabas takes Saul under, and we know the thing that is intriguing to me about the story is we know absolutely nothing about Barnabas until Acts chapter 4. Not one word. We don't know who trained him. We don't know who converted him. None of it. And yet, here he is, and he goes and he takes Saul and he says, come with me, we're going on a missionary journey. And you got to think, what? And then when they have a disagreement over John, they said, wait a minute, we got to add somebody. Let's go get John Mark and let's bring him with us too. So they go on this missionary journey. The three of them, Mark says, I've had it, I'm done. Y'all can have this, and he leaves. Then they're getting ready for another missionary journey. Barnabas goes to Saul and says, I want to go do this again. I want to take John Mark with us. And Saul says, no, not going to do it. He left us when the going got rough. Don't have nothing to do with it. Barnabas says, okay, I'm going to take him. What are you going to do? Now, Saul, by this time, has obviously been taught by Barnabas, I need to find somebody else. And so what does he do? He goes and gets Silas. And so now you got Barnabas and Mark going this way, Paul and Silas going this way, and you think, man, there's what could possibly go wrong. And it doesn't. It's a positive response. You got two sets of missionary teams now going out in different directions. Later, Paul sends letters and says, send John Mark, he's encouraging me. Their situation has changed. But then you move from Paul and Silas to now Paul takes the young man Timothy, which Dale just talked about, and says, I want to train him. Do you think for a minute that Paul took Timothy and said, here's Ephesus, knock yourself out? I don't think he did that. I think he helps Timothy, gives him the tools that Barnabas has given him, and now he's giving them to Timothy. And then what does he tell Timothy to do as the work of the evangelist? You teach other people who are going to be able to teach other people. Who are going to be able to teach other people. Who are going to be, and it just replicates itself down through time. He does the same thing with Titus. And so it replicates this, and we don't know who did Timothy and who did Titus interact with. Where does this thing roll out further? We know they were successful because the churches in those areas did grow. Those churches in those areas did build leaders, because Timothy is going into a congregation that has elders. Titus is not. Where did Titus learn how to develop leaders? Paul. Who learned it from? Barnabas. Who learned it from? Jesus. And so when you think on that, kind of use that as a foundation for what we want to talk about, and think about the things that Barnabas does in Scripture. And I wanted to kind of do this. I've got a couple things I just want to say, and I'm going to ask them. We're doing a lot of questions to help facilitate what's going on. Because leadership, there is a need in the church to reproduce leaders. I'm not just saying that we need to have leaders, we got to reproduce them. Just like I reproduced all of these handouts, we've got to take the pattern and reproduce it. And there's reasons for developing leaders, and this not only affects the church, this affects our society at large. Appreciate Patrick talking about the need for leadership in the church, the need for leadership in the world. I was at a conference last year, and one of the speakers had been asked to run for president. Back when Trump and all the others were running for president, and he says, can you believe this bunch of clowns we got running for president? And we thought it was funny, because it was an array of, who ever think Donald Trump would be the president of the United States? At the time you're looking at it going, what? But this man's job, he does leadership development, and he's very good at doing it. And they wanted him to run for president. He says, no. And then he said, well, if you won't run, will you be one of our counselors? He said, no. He said, let the dust settle, let's figure out what's going on. But he says there is a need, he says there's a need to reproduce leaders. We know what good leadership looks like. He says we need to reproduce that. So there's 7 reasons to think about that. One is those closest to the leader will determine the success level of that leader. Not only do they determine the success level of that leader, but they'll also determine the success level of what that leader needs. And they'll help him to be more successful. Evil companions corrupt good morals. Who we hang out with, whether we want to admit it or not, determines who we will be every time. There's somebody made a statement and said, you are the sum total of so many, if I get the percentage of the people that you hang out with. You become like them. And so we need to pay attention to that to reproduce leaders. A congregation's growth potential is directly related to its team's potential, to its leader's potential. Appreciate Patrick talking about the idea of a leadership. A congregation cannot exceed the level of its leaders. They set a glass ceiling that cannot be broken. So if you rated your leadership in your congregation from 1 to 10, and you rated the congregation at a 5, your leaders are 5s. Guess what that congregation will never, ever be? A 6. It will more likely be a 4. And it's because of the leader's potential. Now, it might slip over the line and become a 6 for a little bit, but that 5 is going to pull it right back down. And so that leadership potential, or the growth potential, is related to that. Potential leaders help carry the load. You ever wonder why deacons are included in those positions in Timothy and Titus? What is a leader to do? Like I said, elders, the preacher does the elders' work, the elders do the deacons' work, and the deacons sit on their hands. And we wonder why nobody wants to be an elder. You're killing me. It's the idea, the mindset that comes to our minds. Deacons, elders, potential leaders are those which will help to carry the load of the leader. And so they're there to help supplement that thing. Leaders attract potential leaders. Like I said, if we rate ourselves on a level of 5 to 10, what rating do we give ourselves? Do we look for potential leaders? What kind of leaders are we attracting? Are we attracting a bunch of 3s and 4s? Maybe we need to look at ourselves. That's part of that developing the leader within us. What level are we attracting? Now, if we can attract, if we're an 8, 9, and we're attracting 3s and 4s with the potential to develop them to be 7s and 8s, that's a good thing. But if we're attracting 3s and 4s and want them to stay as 3s and 4s, we're failing somewhere. And it's probably with us. And so we need to think about that. Leaders who mentor potential leaders multiply their effectiveness. You don't only add to your effectiveness, you multiply it. Because the situation with Paul and Barnabas goes from Paul and Silas to Barnabas and John Mark to Paul and Timothy and Paul and Titus, and all of this just continues to branch out. And so it builds out of that. Develop leaders enhance the future of the congregation. I highlight the future of my congregation depends on the quality of the leaders I develop and equip. It's great to think we'll live forever, isn't it, Clark? And man, we're going to be here forever. But we have a realistic outlook that says, I'm not. You've had a serious life-changing event in your life, Patrick, with a stroke. I had a heart attack a few years ago. Let me tell you something. You want something knock on your door? That does it, don't it? And it changes you. I agree. I heard you telling somebody how it changed you. It changed my outlook. It changed the way I looked at things differently because of it. And then it helped me realize that I'm not going to be here forever. I got to affect change in people that I come in contact with, the people that cross my paths. I need to be able to do that. The more people I lead, the more leaders I lead. If I'm the leader that I need to reproduce leaders, I've got to lead people. I've got to be around people. I'm a leader. What's the saying says, if I'm a leader and no one is following me, I am out for a walk. I got to have followers. Nobody gets to the top of the mountain alone. If it were true, the guys going up to Mount Everest would have a backpack on and be, but they take a whole herd of these Sherpas go with them to carry all these supplies and all this stuff that stays up and down the mountain. They do it with a group. And in those, I heard a story told the other day of a Sherpa that was interviewed, and he's carried all these famous people to the top of Mount Everest. And they interviewed him, and he says, they're like, why do you do that? He says, well, I need to help this guy get up there. He says, but why climb Mount Everest? He says, you've obviously never been to the top. He's taking people to the top, and he's showing them what needs to be done. And it's kind of moved from there. This kind of where the thing is, am I raising potential leaders? Ask yourself the question, Who can I bring into my circle of influence in order to begin the process of developing leaders? Think about that for just a minute. What does that person look like that you can bring into your circle of influence to develop them as a leader? Are they the person who's standing up here leading singing every week? Does it necessarily have to be that? It can be that person. Who would it be, Becker?
Anybody.
Anybody.
Anybody, everybody has potential to be a leader.
Okay. First thing I think we think about is what Becker's saying is we got to realize everybody has the potential. Now, at the same time, everybody has a different potential, don't they? When I was a teenager, leading singing was not something you saw in my potential. Unlike Patrick, I did not grow up in a singing home.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I hung around with people who liked to sing. I remember Brother Nolan Yates wanted me to learn how to sing shape notes as a teenager, and wanted me to learn how to sing tenor. His son sang a beautiful tenor. I said, all I saw with Brother Yates singing in his shape note group were people that were old. I went, I don't want to do that. I'm a kid. I'm a teenager. I don't know. Today I wish I knew how to do it. Of course, now I'm old, so that makes sense. But that, and then he says, I want you to sing tenor. And I went, that's kind of why I want to sing bass. I'll be a real man, sing bass. Now I wish I could sing tenor. Every now and then I pull it off a little bit, but not too well. But you look for people that have potential to do things, to train them, and you may be today, now I lead singing today. But it's because somebody said, you can do it, and gave me that opportunity. Like Dale said, you provide opportunities for people to help develop them to be potential leaders. And it may be a 15-year-old kid who speaks with a lisp that you take to a congregation to talk about going to a mission trip. I was invited to come to the Springville Road congregation several years ago and carried a young man, Jay Hall. Clark, you know Jay. Jay was 15. Horrible lisp. I mean, he has struggled with it. He's overcome a lot of it now. But when I was asked to come speak to fill in for their preacher, I said, tell you what, I'll lead singing. I know I can do the lesson and preach, but I want him to preach. Is that okay? Nobody ever told me no. And that's a good thing. but when I'm done, this kid struggles through his lesson, but he's wearing it out. I said, now, don't you believe the brethren in Jamaica would love to hear that guy preach? Mm-hmm. His trip's done. He's paid all his money. You know, we're good. But I gave him that opportunity. Now he's been a youth minister at Central. He's moved on to Buford, Georgia. You know, he's moved around and doing a lot of things. There's several other young men I've done that with. But you see a potential leader, and it may be some scrawny kid that needs encouragement, or it may be a grown-up who's like, I can't lead prayer. I can't lead a worship service. I don't know what I can do. But yet when you go through a worship service skills class, that young man and his father are the ones who deliver the lesson the night you kind of let them, hone their skills. And they speak for 15 minutes apiece. When I told them they had to speak for 5, they freaked out. Mm-hmm. But then they're up there for about 15, 20 minutes apiece. So think about what does that person look like that you would bring in as a potential leader to encourage to be a leader of the future. And as you try to look at those things and think about who those people are. Number 3, in what ways can I proactively grow myself as well as grow up other leaders? What am I doing? This is part of the developing the leader within me. What am I doing to develop myself to be a better leader? What are some of the ways you guys develop yourselves as better leaders? Study?
One thing that I did, I surrounded myself with whatever I wanted to be a leader at. Like when I was young, a little bit younger, a few years ago, I wanted to be involved in the cycle of being a song leader in the church. So, my dad is an actual song leader, so he was right there in my corner, you were over there, and then back then there were a few other song leaders, so I just went to them. I was like, hey, do you think this is the right song? If you just surround yourself by great leaders and what you want to lead at.
Okay. What are some other ways you develop yourself? I saw somebody on Facebook the other day, preacher sites, I believe we talked about them, and they were like, some of these sites, our brethren, I told one of them, I said, we eat our young. I mean, they're horrible. But I saw this guy on there bragging about the fact that he attended no activities to improve his education as a preacher. Because I don't want to be narrowed into the traditional views of what's going on in the church. And I bit my tongue and was about to break my fingers because I just wanted to post back, you're an idiot. I mean, that's the knee-jerk reaction to that kind of stuff. I'm like, it may be. Keith and I met in Texas a couple years ago at an event that the University Church puts on called Focal Point. Some of you are going to PTP next week. You go to these things. Do you agree with everything that is said at these events by everybody that speaks? I don't. But you know what? I learned something from just about everybody there. I'm encouraged by some of the things that are there. One year we were at Focal Point, my wife was with me, and I was having some frustrating things going on at home, and went out and took a phone call, came back in, and Susan says, we need to leave. Well, on Thursday at Focal Point, Dan Winkler is the featured speaker for 3 messages. And I had heard him speak the year before, and my wife says, we need to go home now, don't we? And I went, well, number one, it's a 13-hour drive home. We don't just do it now. I said, no, I'm gonna stay here and listen to Dan, because this guy's gonna change my attitude. 3 lessons later, I'm ready to go home. I'm good. You get encouraged by people like that. It helps develop me as a leader, take advantage of those opportunities that are there to do that. Ask yourself the question, number 8, how many people do I currently lead? Now that number should start with at least 1, which is me. But how many people do you lead beyond that? You ever thought about that? You know, Keith, Scott, Clark, y'all stand in front of congregations on Sundays. Are you really leading those? Are those the people you lead? Those the only people you lead? Truth be told, you're probably not leading some of them. You probably stood in front of a congregation and watched some of them go to sleep, things like you're like, not really leading them, but think about who you are really leading. You know, you've got 2 young men, 2 sons, 3 sons, I'm sorry, you did say 3.
Yeah.
And 1 daughter.
One's young.
One's really young, yeah.
Too, yeah.
You know, you're leading them. And Dale talked about leading his sons. Clark's got 3 boys. You know, you're leading them. You know, you're doing that, and you're making that happen. But beyond your family, who are you leading? And I mean really leading. That person you throw your arm around and say, come here. Or that person you throw your arm around and say, I need to go visit so-and-so, let's go visit. You know, who do we have there that we lead and make that happen? And how many of those people are they? How can you create room, number 9, room for others to share in leadership responsibilities? I'll just do that because I know it'll be done right if I do it myself. That is so easy to say. And yet that can lead to so much stress that it's overwhelming. When I had my heart attack a few years ago, I asked the doctor, because they do the heart cath and they put in a stent, you know, this little piece says, well, all the other arteries are about 10%, you know, build up in there, everything's good. What happened? I said, stress. And I started doing research. Stress-induced heart attacks are more common than diet-induced heart attacks. Probably in the stroke world, stress is more prevalent as a huge contributing factor to that, other than just health issues. You know, stress, but if you can create room for people to share in those responsibilities, what I like to do now, and I've learned a lot better skills since a heart attack, my personal evaluation is, I practice an 80-20 rule. You heard it, the Pareto principle says, you know, 20% of the people do 80% of the work, or do more work than the other 80% of the people. And a lot of times we talk about in congregations, it may be even a 5%, 95%, or 10%, 90%, whatever. Flip the number just a little bit. If I can give you a task that you can do 80% as well as I do it, it's yours. Would it be the way I would do it? No, not entirely. But you know what? If I never give you that room for that 80%, say, hey, when you get down to the 20 you can't do, come find me. Mm-hmm. What have I done? One, he's bearing some of the responsibility and some of the load. The other is he's growing. Because that little 20% window of growth is huge in putting it, really helping you be a much better leader. And so kind of think about, how do I determine when I need to do it and when do I need to give it up? Now, as an elder, there are things that we have to handle that nobody else can handle. And for years, I think some of the things that have happened and been wrong is we've pawned them off on the preacher and said, here, you handle that. Because we haven't developed ourselves enough to do that. People come to you and they say, a woman comes to you and says, me and my husband are having trouble, can you help? Go talk to the preacher. Why? When we can develop the skills to help that person. I've trying to learn in the last few years how to be a life coach. And I know that's a horrible, it's an overused term, but when you coach people instead of counseling them, the difference between the two. So now when somebody comes to me and says, I want you to help me with my marriage, okay, let's sit down. I start asking questions. And help them do what they know they need to do to make their relationship, and deal with everything that way. And so we can develop skills that will help us to do it, but also know your limits. This is where other people help them to bear the limitations. There is a time when someone will come to you with an issue of life that you're simply, unless you're a professional, you're not qualified to do. Make sure you know somebody. I do know a couple. I found another person the other day that is a licensed counselor. And whenever something comes up like that, you go, whoop, you need to go see brother so-and-so or sister so-and-so and take care of that. So these people can help us to share in the responsibilities and roles. Look at the things that will make us more effective, and look at the things that will take away from our weaknesses. We've all got weaknesses, whether we want to admit them or not. And so we need to think about those weaknesses and how they will help us benefit. The definition of leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. The idea of the world becomes a better place when people become better leaders. Why is that? What makes a difference in good leadership in the world and poor leadership?
You can learn more. Do that make sense?
What's that?
Can you learn more?
Learn more?
Yeah.
What does it make it if your leadership, the world, if you watch the world news and can stomach it, when you look around the world and you see countries that have very poor leadership, what's happening in those countries?
They have chaos.
Chaos. Because the leadership is so poor. So,
Well, a concept that I learned when I was in college, taking computer programming and such, is garbage in, garbage out.
exactly.
And when you put bad leadership into an environment, it produces exactly what you put into it. And so when you have these leaders who don't know how to lead, don't know how to influence in a positive manner, then you just get exactly what they put into it.
Exactly. So it's why many people don't develop as leaders. One, they say, I'm not born a leader, so I can't lead. It just doesn't come natural to me, so I don't do it. A title and seniority will automatically make me a leader. I have to laugh when I read that one. As I was putting these notes together, I'm like, a title, I'm an elder. I have the title of an elder, I am an elder. I'm completely clueless. Am I really an elder? I got a title. But sometimes people will think that, hey, once I got the title, I'll be a leader. I'll have 40 years service with the phone company. You know what that title gives me? A severance package when they lay me off. That's all I got. It's gonna get me before it's over. Doesn't make me a leader just because I've been there 40 years. You know, time and title and seniority, that doesn't automatically make you a leader. The idea of work experience will automatically make me a leader. You know, once again, 40 years of service. People call me for help, and they call me to how to do things, but that doesn't necessarily make me a leader. I'm a resource, more than anything, for those kinds of things. I'm waiting until I get a position to start developing as a leader. That's like I'm waiting until I'm bleeding more before I go to the hospital. Doesn't make a bit of sense, does it? So we think about those things, and they're excuses, incorrect perspectives. Think about how to develop a leader. Ask, where can I increase my influence to enhance my leadership? Where can I do that? As you're thinking about these things, looking toward being a leader. Where am I leading someone now that I can expand my influence? And then the next few things, it's called the 5 levels of leadership. This is based on a book that John Maxwell wrote called The 5 Levels of Leadership, oddly enough. And how that you start at the level of position. I've got a position. I move up to the level of permission. I still have my position, but now I lead by permission. I can be a positional leader as long as I ever want to be, but until I have permission to lead, people are not going to follow me. They're going to follow once you give given that permission. Production level, the idea of producing and comparing relationships versus results. I can have results, that's production. But do I have relationships? And that's developed on level 4, the idea of people development. I move to that next level, and then I go to the pinnacle level, which means now I'm at the level where I've developed myself as a leader, but what am I doing? I'm going back and pulling somebody from a position to permission and pulling them along the ladder too, to help them with it. And the last thing I wanted to ask you to think about, look at think about the 5 people you influence the most in your life. And I broke it out into 3 different areas, business and things, but think about it in your spiritual life. Think of 5 people that you influence in your life. Write them down. One of the big things that I've learned is to write them down and then think about what level of leadership influence do I have with that person? Do I have a lot of influence or none? And sometimes when I don't have a lot, it's because I don't have a relationship with that person. I know that person, but I don't have a relationship with that person. And so we need to think in those terms of, we're not going to look for results, but I'm looking for a relationship, because like Barnabas, no doubt when Barnabas goes to get Paul and bring him to the elders in Jerusalem, he's got to do a little groundwork first, doesn't he? Because one, I think Barnabas has got to say, can I really trust Paul? You know, they still call him Saul. He's still, the paperwork is probably still out there floating in the world somewhere for more people to be in prison. Is some of that in Paul's back pocket, and this is all a joke. But he develops that relationship. He talks to the people in Damascus and goes, I need to bring him to the elders. Then he trusts him. Of course, they send Saul back to Tarsus, and Barnabas goes back and gets him when he's ready. I read some commentaries and things of that nature. Said Saul may have spent 13 years in Tarsus before Barnabas went and got him. Why is he doing that? He's rebuilding his influence. He's rebuilding his image, his thought patterns that he's doing. And Barnabas obviously knows that. Somehow he knows what's going on. And so he's able to pull him forward to make that happen. You know, Barnabas is kind of go back to where we started. Barnabas is able to see things in Saul before anybody else does. And he's able to develop things in Saul that he doesn't even see himself. You know, because think, you take somebody as zealous as Saul, I'm gonna kill Christians. That's his basic motto. They're violating the Jewish law, time for them to die. You take that zeal and convert it to, I'm gonna be a Christian and be and be able to make that flip in the mindset. Barnabas is able to do that. And then Barnabas is able to provide him opportunities. It's interesting, in all their journeys, I don't know, but once, maybe twice, where Barnabas even says anything. Paul is the one doing all the preaching. I picture Barnabas in the back doing a good job. When they leave, he goes, that lesson sounded pretty good. To help him be the leader that he needed to be. So think about, as we think about developing leaders, think about developing yourself at the same time while you're developing other people. And a lot of it is about writing things down and writing the names of people down that you can influence. Take people that you may not see any potential in at all, but look, put them on a list, potential leaders. Right now he's a 1. Tomorrow he could be a 2. You know, the first time you've ever met Jay Hall, when Jay was 12, I think the first time I met him, Jay's father passed away when Jay was very young. Jay talked about a Bible, and I've never met his daddy. As far as I know, his daddy never came to church. But Jay, I believe, has that Bible to this day. And he told how that Bible was one of the most important things his daddy ever gave him. But here's this scrawny kid standing there speaking to a room full of people, and you're like, I don't know if he'll make it to where he is now. Billy Camp spoke at Decatur Highway the other night. I got to thinking and remembering Billy Camp stories. Some of you know Billy from Del Rey. Billy, twice, while Billy was speaking at Decatur Highway, when the young men spoke, he passed out. Or nearly passed out. I was the one guy who put everybody together to speak for last youth night, and I put everybody together, and Billy's up there, man, I mean, he is going at it. And he is preaching, he's wearing a white shirt. He chose, like me, he didn't like wearing ties, and I still don't to this day. But Billy's standing there speaking, and I get looking at him, and I'm going, he is sweating a lot. He's sweating a lot. And the next thing he says is, I can't continue my lesson, and came down on the podium and sat down. So I'm like, what do I do? I'm like, well, I'll finish. I think I know where he was headed. I'll finish his lesson. Well, I stand up. The rest of the audience can't see him. I mean, except from the back of the head. I see him sitting there, and I'm like, he ain't gonna make it. I thought for sure people are running for water and towels and everything else. But now Billy's, I think he's going to school to get his PhD now. You know, I mean, he has become way more, raised in a single parent household. You know, we need to look at people and go, that person has potential. Regardless of how much their potential is today, and then we say, you know what, I can take you from being a 2 or 3 or 4 to being a 9 or a 10. And that's one of the ways effectively that we can grow leaders in the church and fill that gap that we need. And as we fill that gap, we may train them and they may never serve as an elder in the church. But they can be leaders in their businesses, in their jobs, in their wherever they are. They'll still be a leader. And they'll still make a difference in the world and in the community because we took the time to develop them. I'm like Dale said, I think of people that in my life, like Vic Gerald and Larry Vaughn, who helped me be a speaker. Vic Gerald was a preacher in Hurricane, West Virginia. He was a Sunset guy. And I'm 12 years old, and he says, we're going to do youth night. We went through several weeks, you got to give a speech about something. One guy spoke about light bulbs. And I thought, that is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. But it taught him a skill, how to talk. And that first night, I'm standing behind that podium. I can see over it. I was pretty tall. But I mean, I ain't got a steel grip on that thing. And I thought, I'm not going to make it. And then Larry Vaughn would come to me and say, I got a Bible study tonight, you wanna come run the projector? This is the days of Joe Miller film strips. Well, sure. I'd go run film strip projectors for him, teaching me how to do evangelism, and not just how to do it, but how to have a fire to do it, and how to see the potential in people do it. Now in my life, I look at young people that are behind me, like Becker and others. My 17-year-old grandson, Dominic, will come, he's mad at me right now,
Yeah.
because I'm going to Orlando in August, at the end of the month, and he's not going with me. He came to me before I drove all the way to Focal Point this year and says, when are we going to Texas? I says, you do know that's a 13-hour ride with me.
Mm-hmm.
He said, sure, we'll go, no problem. We had a great time. I said, now there's a teen classes and you gotta go. And when people walk up to you and say, I wanna introduce myself, you're gonna look at them in the eye and do that. Now he's high on the Asperger's scale, and that's very uncomfortable for him. But when he come home, his mother goes, where's my child?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, he's still there, but he's better. We need to find the people we can influence to do this. I appreciate it. Thanks for your time.